Stagnation! Crypto warriors! Are you guys ready? Happy Monday morning to you guys. We are at it again. President is not here today. He's got to handle some business. So it's going to be all double O for you guys today. Hope you guys can hear me. You can see me clearly. Let me know. Give me some feedback. I see Reno Gamble in the house. Sip my coffee and butter my bread. In the meantime, yes, getting ready for y'all. Thank you for joining. Just gonna wait a few minutes here to see people join in. Today, we're gonna be talking about globalization, hot topic, and Bitcoin. How does those two work together? Yup, how you guys liking my hat, man? I'm over here trying to look like prison. It's all about that hat, man, that it factor. Yep, let's have you guys join here. Before we get started, we have a couple of people in the room right now, about 6 people. I'll give you guys a minute more and then we can get started here. Today we're talking about globalization and Bitcoin. And 007 all by himself representing. Alright, let me just go ahead and get this started, man. When you guys think of globalization, what do you guys think? What comes to mind? Globalization. To me, when I think of globalization, I think of, well, jobs being shipped over to China, to Mexico, to India, to Sri Lanka, to, some other nations where you can get the job done cheaper. Cheaper with cheaper labor, without the regulations, and then you ship the end products back to the States, and you make a ton of profits. At least that's what globalization means. For the masses, the impact that they get, which they're supposed to be getting, is a reduction in the price of the product and services that they're paying for. But are you really feeling that impact? Is the multi-million dollar, billion-dollar profits coming into your wallets? Because I think that's what you guys said you voted for. Because at the end of the day, the CEOs are the ones getting the multi-million dollar pockets money to take home. So is globalization really impacting the people? That's what you got to ask yourself. And I think the masses are starting to realize that globalization is not for the people as they've sold it. That is just for the corporations to make a lot more money and avoid paying taxes, which at the end of the day, you now have to make up the taxes that have been lost, which your taxes been increased, and they are not paying taxes. That has been the impact of globalization. And we've started to see the reduction of that phase. I think it has plateaued about a decade ago. Is that, at what point do you globalize, free trade agreements and so on and so forth, especially when you're able to bring up other nations like China, and then now they're fighting you back. Research is showing, actually, as a matter of fact, that more people have gone into poverty in developed nations than before we had globalization. About 800 million people are currently hungry, and $42 trillion are in the banks of the 1 percentiles. Question now is, why? How can we fix this? Can this get better? Are we going to continue to be in this type of environment? Those are the questions you got to ask yourself. As a matter of fact, it got worse. I'm not sure if what the mass media will tell you, globalization has gotten better since COVID-19. Whereas the reality is that what you saw during globalization or during COVID-19 pandemic was that the nations that needed the vaccines, which is another total different story at this time, because we're starting to now realize that this whole pandemic was all planned. They didn't get it. South America didn't get it. African countries didn't get it. There was a lot more protectionism going on during the pandemic. The European countries kept all the vaccines to themselves. They bodied up Germany and America, bodied up. They didn't want to share the vaccines because they figured they were protecting their own nations. But in the true world of globalization, which is supposed to be, they're supposed to share those vaccines, which did not happen. Yes. So, someone just asked a question. Does Bitcoin work to aid in globalization? That's a really good question, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Thanks, Ken, for asking that question. I think that Bitcoin could enhance globalization but create a different form of globalization. Whereas instead of a globalization where you're outsourcing, you might be able to insource and be able to protect your own country, be a sovereign country compared to a country where you always being the service provider to the other supposed developed nations. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. Great question, Ken. So let's talk about all the impacts of globalization. You can see that globalization is more of how do we use the SWIFT system or the petrodollar to transact globally, because everything is based upon the US dollar. This happened after the World War II, when the agreement was made that hey, the currency that we're going to use to transact globally was going to be the US dollar. So you have the euro dollar, you have the Asia dollar, you have the petrodollar. Long story short, everybody transact on the US dollar. You are given a loan through the IMF on the US dollar, which then puts your country at a disadvantage because anytime there's inflation, you can never pay off the debt. That's just a fact because the currency is not in your nation's currency. So if there's inflation, you cannot catch up. Whereas your country is the one providing the resources. So a good example will be what happened in Sri Lanka. Even worse, during the which we still have going on right now, the Ukraine-Russia war, which is the war of cousins, literally. I don't know why they're trying to get the rest of the world involved in it. It's just two cousins fighting each other. But at the end of the day, I guess we have to print out more money to allow them to fight each other. This is still what, second, third time cousins are fighting, and they're trying to get the rest of the world involved in it. We don't need that kind of war. Anyway, I'm not saying I don't support Ukraine or I don't support Russia. It's just facts. But yeah, weaponizing the US dollar, which is supposed to be the global transactory currency, makes an impact or a dent in globalization because other nations are going to start asking, hey, why does this make sense? So now, guys, this is where Bitcoin and this new paradigm shift now comes into this whole globalization conversation. And I'd like to read this little line here. These countries are facing challenges of diminishing returns. A good example would be Sri Lanka. I think Mexico is feeling some impact as well. El Salvador saw that majorly. So these countries are facing challenges of diminishing returns. They're not seeing the value of being part of this global party, and starting to see a bigger widening wealth gap. We see that with America and China building their economies, getting bigger, whereas the countries or nations that are bringing in the resources are actually poorer. China is taking a full advantage of the trade agreements that they have with the US, which is what has made China a lot more developed. So yeah, let me quickly look at the comments real quick before I continue this topic right here. So we have BK Crypto in the house, champion. Thanks for joining us. We have Ken earlier. He made a question about does Bitcoin work to aid in globalization. We're tackling that right now. Thanks for joining us. So those are the comments I have right now. Let's go ahead and continue on this topic. So, the future of the global economy. We see the impact of globalization. How can Bitcoin be of impact? Does Bitcoin increase or add to the current globalization? Does it change the paradigm shift? I personally think that it could cause some more insourcing and reduce the impact of globalization because it's going to allow more nations to be sovereign without the need of the current globalization, which only benefits EU, America, China at the end of the day. Because as we all see, the wealth gap continues to increase. So various countries are starting to lean more towards protectionism, like I was saying, populism, and nationalism. This is where globalization is going through. This is what I've been reading, and this is what I'm trying to share, and I'm going to be showing you guys more details about that shortly. So how is that going to happen? That is the question. Well, we all know about ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. 5G got pushed back really hard before COVID 19. That is just going to allow us to transmit and transfer data much, much faster, much more efficiently. We have IoT, Internet of Things. The question now is, who do you trust with your information? If your fridge, your microwave, your vacuum is connected to the internet, who has all that information? You guys already know what Google is doing with their cameras, which is connected to your TV, connected to your doorbell, and so on and so forth. You gotta ask yourself those questions. Why are you trusting these entities with your private information? And then, of course, we have blockchains, and we see the impact that Bitcoin is making in terms of transaction and the whole monetary system. So this is why we're saying that we see a paradigm shift in globalization. But at the end of the day, when you look at these major technologies like artificial intelligence, 5G. By the way, let me show you some trends on 5G really quickly. 5G on the other end. Quick share of my screen here. I'm sure you guys can see it. Um, Potential trends in 5G. This is from PwC. Great company. They do a lot of accounting for the entire world. Artificial intelligence. Um, I think this, if you're not invested in artificial intelligence outside of Bitcoin, you should probably start considering that because it's going to make a major impact. You see about $15.7 trillion potential contribution to the global economy. How is that going to happen? It's going to happen because it's going to be full on automation, artificial intelligence doing jobs for people 24/7 without you and I having to even worry about it. Bitcoin, for example, is a good example of that as well because no banks is shut. Banks shut down on Saturdays and Sundays. Bitcoin is open 24/7. Um, Look at that. That's already creating some more efficiencies. About 26% boosting GDP. We can already see that, and it's going to start to increase even more. And all AI users use case are ready to capture in impact index. So they have a bunch of bullets here talking about how artificial intelligence will impact the global economy. As a matter of fact, if you're a software engineer, we already know what ChatGPT is doing. Literally writes the code for you. If you're a data analyst, artificial intelligence can do that much faster. We see what's going on with journalism, advertising. Artificial intelligence can literally write entire articles for people. All you have to do is reduce. So instead of having a staff of 10 or 20 people, maybe you only need a staff of 2 people. Instead of you outsourcing your job out to the rest of the world, you can do it in-source with less people, therefore saving you costs. So we can see some impact in India, in China, where all these jobs have been outsourced to. If you're a teacher, maybe artificial intelligence can even replace that. It's been done already right now. Financial analysts, graphic design, we see what's going on with what artificial intelligence is doing with graphic design in that space. Accounting, customer service agents, we already see what AI is doing while you can chat online with a bot and it can answer your question. So at the end of the day, we have this paradigm shift, but at the bottom of it all is blockchains. I think blockchains like Bitcoin is the critical infrastructure that brings all of this together. Why do I say that? I really do think that at the core of all this technology is the issue of trust, right? If you have artificial intelligence and you have 5G and you have Internet of Things, question is my data, right? Where am I storing my data? Who do I trust to store my data? And as we all know, we humans are greedy. Humans are greedy. And what we've seen over time is that we've given the government our trust, and the governments have abused it. We've given organizations like Facebook and Google our trust, and guess what? They abused it as well. So, how do we fix this? And I think Bitcoin is here to fix that. As the global world, let me go ahead and switch back. As the global world switches to understand that globalization can be done in source without necessarily going outward, and you can still interact with the rest of the world with IoT or 5G technology or IPv6, name it. You can do that without necessarily shipping your GDP or your labor force outside of the country with these new technologies. Question now is, how do we do that more effectively? And I think this is where Bitcoin comes in. It fixes the issue of trust, which is the biggest issue that we have right now with the globalization theory or paradigm. And this is where Bitcoin now comes into play. Instead of you trusting governments or trusting people or trusting trade agreements, you can literally just trust mathematics. It's that simple. You implement Bitcoin and you can quickly right away start making major changes, actually much more trustworthy interactions globally without the currency wars or the current wars that we keep finding ourselves in. Who do you trust with your freedom? Who do you trust with your information? Because these technologies are coming in very fast. Artificial intelligence, 5G is already implemented, IPv6 is going to allow you to have access to more IPs. The list goes on. And this is where Bitcoin really comes into play. I'm going to allow me to read through my notes here really quickly so I can make it a lot much clearer without me just rambling away, right? The law of code transcends disputes of differences and provides us with common language to communicate with certainty in a trust-free way. That is what Bitcoin provides. Because it's literally code. You don't have to worry about a middleman changing that code, moving the goalposts like Jerome Powell does with the US dollar fiat system, which we're about to find out again this week. It's just code. It's there. Let the code do that. Take out the middleman. You know, that is critical. And I think this is where globalization is going to be a lot more efficient if implemented on the Bitcoin blockchain instead of this crap that they're trying to push, which is CBDCs. I really do think that CBDCs is going to really create more competition for resources and challenges between countries trying to figure out which currency or which CBDC should be used. All right. Now, let's go a little bit further into how Bitcoin can make an impact in this future of globalization. I do think globalization is still going to be here, but instead of outsourcing, it's a lot more insourcing, but then we can transact with one another without necessarily using one person's currency as a control tool or a power tool to take advantage of others. That is where I see Bitcoin coming into this action. All right, so how does this happen? Number one, the ownership and transaction of assets would no longer need to be validated by a trusted third party. Therefore, providing solutions for global uncertainty, providing globally an ability for us to operate with one another without the issue of trust. That's number one advantage of Bitcoin right there. It's not an Ethereum-based blockchain where it's still controlled by one person or some country, or CBDC that is still controlled by one person that then takes advantage of another country's resource. Bitcoin just creates a neutral playground where we can all transact with one another. Another way that Bitcoin does this is that it's sharply reduced the transaction cost and friction. We already see that with the SWIFT system. I send money to Nigeria all the time. This sucker takes 5 days for the money to get there, and they charge me a ton of money. But on the Bitcoin network, if you're transacting with sats or if you're just using the Lightning network, I can move money, resources, data faster, cheaper, cross borders without the issue of all these transaction fees or payment settlements. I got to go to another person's bank. So Bitcoin does that. Before I continue to the three last bullets that I have here, let me quickly look at the comments again, and then we'll be back to talking about how Bitcoin changes the new global world order. They want to call it world order. Why not call it Bitcoin standard? Anyway, we have recycling guy here saying, "Gentlemen, good morning." Good morning, the recycling guy. And we have BK Crypto saying, "Don't trust, verify." Exactly. We verify that on the blockchain. As simple as that. We don't need to trust the banks. We don't need to trust the central bankers. We don't need to trust the government because they're all bought out by the central bankers. You just verify on the blockchain. As simple as that. These are the values that Bitcoin brings to globalization. Do not let them tell you lies that they can do it with the middleman. Middleman has always been the fault. Always been the issue. Go and ask the Romans. They'll tell you what happened. All right. Third on my list is that Bitcoin would bolster asset liquidity while lowering barriers of entry for the unbanked. You can ask Nigerians this with the whole issue with the e-naira. It basically allows you to be able to transact globally, have access to your own value. Liquidity is there because it's just everybody trading with one another without some middleman trying to limit who access what and whom. You know, that's another answer right there. I already mentioned this, but let's look at it from a different angle. You want to borrow money? There's no need for a middleman to say, I want to verify your credit, or if you cannot verify your credit. As we see more smart contracts come into the Bitcoin network, it's just a simple verification on the blockchain. Okay, you want to loan somebody, we know that the person took the loan. There's no need for the middleman to verify that. If you're a country and you need to transact or take a loan from another country, you can do that straight on the blockchain. And smart contracts will allow you to create that without the old inflationary or deflationary impact that does not allow nations to pay back their debt. This is another solution, folks. This is what Bitcoin can do for the global community instead of us allowing them or allowing the mass media to sell the old middleman equation that have never solved our problem, that has always taken us to war. Now, here's my last bullet. Bitcoin provides real time. See how we're sitting out here waiting for CPI data, waiting for economic data or job data, and we have to wait for the god of fiat to come and tell us what's going to do with the interest rates. On the Bitcoin network, it's live. It's literally happening right there on the blockchain. We, the people, can know where the economy is going instead of waiting for somebody to manipulate the data or change the calculations of what is inflation, what's recession, and so on and so forth. It's right on the blockchain. People might say, oh, it's a security issue. No, it's not a security issue. I don't think it's a matter of national security if your economy is working fine. It just means that the competitor needs to get their hack right. So it's real time, socioeconomics, and hyper database that allows you to distribute information faster. And it could be done with more privacy through cryptographic algorithms. This is what Bitcoin does. Nobody can go into the ledger and change it or tweak it like we do right now with the fiat system. It's just a fact. It cannot be done. And if you try, hey man, you're just gonna get flagged and you're off to your own blockchain. You're not gonna be on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's that simple. This is the solution that Bitcoin brings to globalization, the future of globalization. It's a future that I think we should all be fighting for, that we can all get better with. I see some comments flying in real quick. Let me quickly jump on that. We have some comments coming in from Reno Gamble. Transparency is an underrated benefit of Bitcoin. Tell them, you know it. Transparency is the best way to govern. I've had some managers. The worst managers I've ever had are those managers that keeps a lot of secrets and don't want to tell you what's going on within the organization. Because if you're transparent with your team or with your staff, they can get a lot more done than when you're lying to them. And right now we've had a lot of governments and leaders that are just lying. The last president lied, the current president is lying. We're tired of liars, man. Full of liars. We have another comment here from the cycling guy. Bitcoin helps facilitate global trade. We just need smarter counterparties that are willing to accept BTC for their goods and services. After that first transaction, people usually see the light. Yes, sir. Yes. I think we need more countries. If you can influence anybody in your day-to-day life, we need a circular Bitcoin network going on. And if you're going to your barber or you're going to a store, let's try to get people to start transacting in Bitcoin. Eventually, cities and nations will start transacting in Bitcoin, like what we see in El Salvador, and people will start seeing the benefits. Lower transactions. The banks don't want this because they don't see the added value in that equation. That is why you keep seeing the media fighting back, and you keep seeing all this fraud out there. But the more you understand money and you understand the benefit of what this blockchain does for you, the better it is for you. We have another comment here from Reno Gamble. Transparency and privacy often don't go hand in hand, but Bitcoin allows merger of these two often contrary ideas. This is very true. We have another comment here coming in. Bitcoin is money with integrity. For shizu. All right, we have a minute here. Let me quickly go through this. The recycling guy business will eventually follow the mob. That's the power of the people. They need to realize. Push the envelope, they will follow. We are pushing. Crypto Nation. We also have here. Oh, you guys are going at it today, man. Integrity, agreed. Let me see one more here. Reno Gamble. Yes, countries can be encouraged if various people from other countries set up links from Ghana to Nigeria to the Caribbean to the US to Canada, Europe, Asia, etc. China will eventually wake up. I do think so. There's this whole conversation going on about China re-enabling people to use crypto. We'll see. Yes, it can happen. Real talk. Guys, today was fun. We had a blast. If you have not followed us yet, please follow us. Crypto Nation. Like, subscribe. We do this every Monday morning at 9 a.m. And of course, follow us on Stack Nation. We are called StackFin on YouTube, StackFin on Twitter. I'll be on there all the time, responding. Thanks for following us over there as well. And for sure, StackFin on Facebook. We like to hang out with your dads and moms. Grandpa and grandma need to understand money as well. In the meantime, Instagram is still on here. We got banned on Instagram for telling the world the truth, for preaching the gospel of Bitcoin. But don't worry, we'll be back. We might just go to nursery, who knows. Spotify. We like to have conversations with y'all, man. If you want to be on the show, link us up. And we're ready. Let's have this wonderful conversation. It's been wonderful, y'all. Have a wonderful Monday. And remember, pain without gain, right? So don't worry about the current price action of Bitcoin right now. Just focus on the freedom of the future. We will overcome this as well. Have a wonderful week.